Formatting command output. You know what? It's time to make some of the output of these commands look a little prettier. So let's work on formatting them to create a nicer visual display. Here's what we're going to cover. There's really three main day-to-day formatting modes that you can work with in PowerShell. Wide lists, regular lists, and tables, and we're going to play with all of them. There's also some fun @ curly bracket hash table stuff that we can do with tables. I'm also going to make sure I show you some of the faux pas that people make when they try and format. This is probably one of the biggest gotchas in all of PowerShell, so I'm going to totally make sure you don't get hung up on it. Sometimes the default output of a PowerShell command is pretty attractive. Sometimes it's pretty bogus. Kind of depends on the command and whether or not Microsoft has created an attractive looking default layout. In fact, way later in this series, we're going to talk about how you can create the same type of attractive default layouts that Microsoft does. But in the meantime, let's talk about what you can do right in the command line to make things more attractive. So the first commandlet that I promised to cover will allow us to format a wide list. Now this guy defaults to displaying a two-column list of names. You only get to display one thing here. You can change what gets displayed by using its property parameter, but you only get to select one property. It can only display one. You can't do a comma-separated list. It explodes. You can tell it to do more columns if you want to. 6 is nice. If you're trying to figure out how many will fit, just ask it to figure it out for you with a nice auto size. And yeah, that's pretty much all you need to know about the format wide commandlet. It's not sexy, it's not fancy, but you know, it gets the job done. It's a simple command for simple times. Next up is format list. Get process, format list. You'll notice that the properties displayed in this list are not the same ones displayed in the default table. There's a separate set of defaults for, hey, look, if he tells you to display a list, but he doesn't tell you what properties he wants, just pick these four. You can pick your own. ID, CPU, virtual memory, working set, paged memory. What else do you want to hear? Oh, name. Name would be nice. It will put these in the order that you specify, so it keeps them, and that's not a bad list. You can do minus property star. Now look, this is there needs to be a space. This is such a good technique that you will usually see people rely on the minus property parameter being positional, so they don't actually type minus property, and they'll rely on the format list alias FL. Format wide is FW, by the way. This is such a common thing in PowerShell that hardcore PowerShell users will actually say, hey, did you pipe it to FL star? What they're telling you is that most of the time when you're creating a PowerShell script and you run across a logic error, most of the time it's because you are thinking that a property contains a value other than what the value actually is. In other words, you made a bad assumption. So let's say, I don't know, let's get up into here. Let's say you assumed, oh, I know a good one too. Here, let's run a copy of Notepad. This would be a good demonstration for this. Get process name Notepad, just to make this list shorter, FL star. Let's say you're writing a little script and you're assuming that the name of that Notepad process is notepad.exe. And you build your entire script based on that presumption, and then your script doesn't work. What you need to do is validate that assumption. You need to see what the actual data is, and format list star is doing that for you. If I get up to the top here where name is defined, you'll see that it's just notepad, not notepad.exe. So the value of FL star is that it's not only showing you every single property, that's what the star is doing, but it's showing you their values so that you can verify your assumptions before you start down a path with a wrong assumption and wind up spending days debugging something. So FL star is really, really useful for that reason. I will be using that a lot through the rest of our nuggets because it's a great way for me to see what data I'm actually dealing with. I've just gotten myself into the habit of it, really. Okay, the big super useful one is format table. Get process format table. FT if you're using the alias. Same as always. And that's because the default output of this command was a table. So I haven't told it to do anything different. I can specify my own properties though. Name, ID, VM, WS, CPU, PM. Now just as when I did this with select object, it tries to fill the width of my screen first. The difference is format table is all about the visual display. Select object did not really give me a way to close these columns together and get rid of that wasted space. Format table does. Using the auto size parameter, it will attempt to size each column for its largest piece of data. Like the name column here looks like it's being pushed out by this presentation font cache name. If that wasn't there, I'm guessing, yeah, that column would actually be a lot slimmer, but that's okay. You can also do minus property star, right? I can put auto size on that. You'll notice sometimes, looks like my screen is, now see 57 columns did not fit and were removed. Sometimes you'll get columns that are stretched off and they've got the 3 dots because they're truncated. I didn't run into any. You can get rid of that by specifying wrap. That'll allow it to wrap onto multiple lines. And look what happens if you do property star without auto size. You get your own matrix screensaver. You can just run that over and over and over. If you change your colors to green on black, it looks awesome. What this has actually done is it has tried to display as many columns as possible, and it's displaying each column header in a single actual column. So that's main window handle, and then the data is just getting the first character of data. So this isn't useful in any way whatsoever, but it looks neat. So that's why I show it to people. Format table can do some other really neat stuff though. Let's do this get process trick again. Actually, you know what? Let's do get service. Format table, group by the status property, and show me the properties name, status, and display name. What this is doing is creating a new set of table headers every time the status property changes. So here it was running, and then the next services were stopped, and so it displayed them, and then it came across a running service, and so it displayed those. This is a lot more useful if you sort it first. Sort on status. And see now I get a table for my running services and a table for my wow, there's a lot of these stopped services. It's like I was on Vista for a second. So the group by is really cool. Here's some more fun stuff. Get process, format table. Let's grab the, what do you think? The name, the ID. Remember this dude? I'm going to do a couple of these. Name equals VM in megabytes. Oops, dang it. Arr. I hit enter instead. Quote, expression equals $_ VM divided by 1 megabyte. Now what I'm doing right here, name equals PM in megabytes. Hit enter again. Expression equals $_ PM divided by 1 megabyte. What I'm doing here is not appreciably different from what I did with select object and in a previous nugget. And you'll notice that I'm still getting these decimal portions here. The difference is that format table is designed for visual display. So I actually get a lot more control. For example, I can add auto size. Yeah, closes them up real nice. Let's get rid of that decimal portion. Inside this hash construct, this hash table, I'm going to put another key value pair. Format string equals N2. Align equals right. I want to right align my numbers. Width equals 10. Oops, that's a number, so it doesn't go in quotes. Now I'm going to do the same thing to this other one. Format string equals N2. The keys don't have to go in quotes, by the way. Sometimes I do that. Obviously, sometimes I don't. align equals right, width equals 12. So before I hit enter, let's break this down a little bit. Let's make sure you're completely on board with what's going on. This entire construct from here to there is a single property. There's a comma before it to separate it from the previous property name, and there's a comma after to separate it from the next property name. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 key equals value pairs. Here's the N or name or L or label key. This is the E or expression key. This is obviously the format string, the align, and the width key, and then each of those is provided a value. All of them are quoted because they're strings except width, which is supposed to be a number, and except for expression, which is a script block, and that's why it's in curly brackets. So I've got 5 different things going on within that one mega structure. So let us now push the enter button. And look what I got. You see this N2 format string means a number with 2 decimal places. That's what I got. Now my width, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, looks like this is just 6 characters wide. It's not actually the 10 or 12 I told it. That's actually kind of normal. For numeric values like that, it won't always listen to you when you're doing auto size. Let's try and take the auto size off. See if it makes a difference at all. Yeah, so it's kind of leaving a lot of extra space for these over here, but oh, sorry about that. I can't get used to these touch scrolly mice. Yeah, so the width you tend to use more for string values, particularly if you want to try and limit the width. PowerShell's not a big fan of making a column wider than it needs to be. But I wanted you to see that. Now look, where did I find that crazy syntax? You're never going to believe it. But it's in the examples. And we'll find it. Here's one, label and expression. That's example 5. Here's another one, label and expression, example 6. So it's in the help file, man. You just got to read the help file. So that's format table. And now you're ready for the super big gotcha of all time. Let's pull that same command back. Let's say I've done this. I have spent forever typing out this god-awful set of punctuation. I mean, this is just appalling, the amount of punctuation in this thing. But I figured it out. It looks awesome. And I want to put auto size back. Now it looks awesome. I want that in a CSV or a HTML file. Why can't I say that? Convert to HTML. Out file processes.html. This is going to be cool. Cool. Processes.html. Huh? What the deuce? That's not what I wanted. Well, but what the heck? Okay, look. Hey, anytime something like that happens and you're not sure what's going on, what do I always tell you? Back off a step. Let's see what happens here. Yeah, that's still garbage. Back off another step. Well, that looks good. Now, here's what you have to ask yourself. I told you way back, several nuggets ago, whenever you're dealing with the pipeline, you need to be able to put your finger on the pipe character and tell me what is in the pipeline right then. So when we look at this pipe character, I know there's process objects because that's what that does. Now I've got blah, 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 all the way to here. What is in the pipeline after that format table command? Because whatever that format table command produced is what's being sent to convert to HTML. And that's clearly not what I expected. That means I don't know what's in the pipeline right at that point. And I need to fix that. I need to fix my lack of knowledge. And the way I do that is by backing off a step and putting in GM. Format table produces objects of the types Microsoft.PowerShell.commands.internal formatting stuff. So when I ran this command, this thing ate my process objects and it produced this garbage. That's what got converted to HTML, and that's what got put into my text file, my HTML text file. Here's the trick. Format commands are designed to produce objects for visual display. Your format command needs to be the last thing on your command line, because once you have formatted it, you're done. There are only 4 commands that know how to deal with the output of a format command. You want to know what they are? Of course you want to know what they are. That's why you get this series. OutHost, OutFile, OutPrinter, and OutString. OutHost puts things visually on the screen. OutFile would put that exact same visualness into a text file. OutPrinter will put that exact same visualness onto a piece of paper. OutString basically does the same thing OutFile will do. It just doesn't put it in a file. It just renders the entire thing as a giant string. So we have a little rule in the PowerShell world. It's just kind of a little mnemonic to help you remember the right thing to do. Format right. Meaning, get your formatting as far to the end or to the right of the command line as possible. Once you have applied formatting, you're done. You're not allowed to do anything else with it. You can't convert it. You can't export it. You can't do anything except let it go to the screen or to a file or to a printer. Now, if you want to let it go to a screen, that's what you get. Let's put it in a file. Is this over here now? There it is. See, it's exactly the same thing that would have shown up on the screen. It's just now in a file. OutPrinter, exactly the same thing on a piece of paper. So this is the thing. You format to the right. If the format command isn't the last command on the command line, then the last command had better be OutFile, OutPrinter, or OutHost, or you are not doing it correctly. So look, let's say you've gotten this far, and you're like, hey, that's fun, but I really wanted to put it into a CSV file. That's fine. I've already shown you how to do that. You need to take out all this visual formatting specific stuff so that you just have name and expression in your hash tables, and instead of using format table, you use select object. Well, yeah, but I wanted to have all that nice visual control. You can't do that. You only get the visual control if you're done manipulating the data. If you want nice, pretty formatted convert to HTML stuff, you have to do it with a cascading style sheet. So there's other ways you have to control the formatting if you're converting off to these different things. CSV files aren't a visual thing. They're data. You don't worry about the column width or the alignment. You don't mess with that. So if you're not done with the data, use select object, because that lets you pipe it onto something else. If you're done and you want to start controlling the visual presentation, then you use one of the format commands. Remember that little tip, that little trick there, that little concept, and you will avoid one of the biggest single things that messes people up and causes them no amount of grief in all of Windows PowerShell. Promise. That was pretty good stuff, right? Wide lists, regular lists, tables, showed you the curly bracket hash table thing so you can do some better alignment. Now remember, tables seem to have a lot of overlap, especially with select object. You use select object if you're not done with it yet, but you get no control over the visual display because that's not what it's for. You use format table when you're ready, you're done, you don't want to manipulate the data anymore, and you want to create an attractive visual display. Keep in mind that those formatting commands therefore need to be pretty much the last thing on the command line. If you stick with that rule, format right, then you will avoid one of the biggest faux pas, the biggest gotchas in all of PowerShell. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.